Zutara became as popular as it did in large part because the conditions were perfect. Unlike in the past, when fandom was niche and relatively vulnerable to attacks from published authors and other media figures who did not want to see fan works made of their art. Unlike in those dark ages, the mid-2000s brought with them a whole host of popular services that became really useful for fan communities, from YouTube to DeviantArt, and even fanfiction.net, which had been around a little longer, got a huge boost in its popularity. We even get things like TV tropes, allowing you to catalog all the different tropes used in whatever work you like. Fandom really took center stage in the mid-2000s, and we have not looked back since then. These conditions perfectly align with when Zutara became popular, and when you combine that with the 9-month-long gap between the end of Season 2 of Avatar and the beginning of Season 3, and the 7th-month gap between the midpoint of Season 3 and when they decided to air all the rest of the episodes of Avatar. Combine all that, and you have a perfect, fertile environment for a lot of spirited discussion between teenagers and young adults and university students on what would happen if these two characters entered into a relationship, and what the probability of the two of them entering into a relationship would be. You have the conditions, and you have the environment. I discuss all this in depth in the video I made on how the scene in the end of Season 2 when Zuko and Katara are together in the catacombs beneath Ba Sing Se really launched this ship. So if you have not seen that video, I highly recommend checking it out if you're interested. But at the end of that video, I said something I want to circle back to, and that is basically this, that even though these sociological conditions were important in launching the popularity of this relationship, the fact that it has remained so popular, even as the internet landscape has significantly shifted, suggests that the appeal of this pairing is not transient. It works for newer viewers as much as it does for older viewers. If you were, say, 14 through 21 when the show ended in 2008, and I'm choosing that age range because a large majority of the fan contributions during the show's initial run came from people in this age group, then you would be anywhere from 26 to 33 by now. A lot of these initial fans still like Avatar, as it is as much of a lifelong obsession as something like The Lord of the Rings is, and a lot of these people still support the pairing of Zuko and Katara. You don't let go of it once it captivates you. But if my YouTube analytics stats are anything to go by, then a lot of the people who watch my videos on Avatar, and especially on Zuko and Katara, are younger than that. Like me, a lot of y'all didn't watch the show until after it aired, and that means you're drawn to this pairing for its innate appeal, not because of structural factors like the rapid rise of platforms that benefited fan communities, or long gaps in time that allowed rumors about Zutara and theories about Zutara to flow and circulate. And also, if you're one of these younger Zutara fans, younger meaning my age arounds, you already knew how this ended before you started watching the show, most likely. Avatar: The Last Airbender is a perpetuator of pop culture osmosis. What I mean by that is just that people know things from the show even if they have not watched the show itself. To take an example from outside Avatar, even people who have never watched The Empire Strikes Back know that Vader is Luke's father. That's just penetrated through the zeitgeist. For Avatar, things like Zuko and his honor and his redemption arc, Katara and her mother, and just the whole general idea of the Avatar and the invasion of the Fire Nation are lodged into the brains of even people who have not watched the show. And along with all that is the knowledge that Katara and Aang is the pairing that won out. I can't speak for literally everyone, but I do imagine that a very large portion of people who watch the show nowadays know that this is how it ends. And yet they still support Zuko and Katara. It's true there is a remake of the show coming out, at least supposedly. As I'm writing this script right now, in the summer of 2020, we have not received any news on the Avatar Netflix show in 2 years. But even if the Netflix show does arrive, it is unlikely that it's going to make this pairing happen. The new adaptation is headed by Konietzko and DiMartino, which is great, as the last time the powers that be adapted Avatar, the show creators were not involved, and the result was the truly abysmal 2010 movie. But it also means that the pairing of Zuko and Katara is unlikely to happen, as the showrunners are firmly on the side of Katang, and have been since before the show even started running. So if Zutara has not happened, and will not happen, why do so many people still support it? Why is there such an outpouring of love for this doomed pairing? For one, a pairing is never dead. Competition between opposing pairings is real and it can often be brutal. And I don't really mind it as long as it doesn't devolve into pettiness or personal attacks. But the old paradigm that held that the competition ended if one of the pairings became official is dead and gone. The last Harry Potter book released in 2007, and the last Harry Potter movie released in 2011. And yet, Harry Potter fans, when they're not trying to ignore whatever nonsense J.K. Rowling is saying these days, these fans are trying to contemplate whether a certain pairing works or not. Do the canon pairings make sense? Do they fit with what we know from the world we're given? Was the show right to have Harry end the series with Ginny? Or should he have ended up with Hermione or Cho? Or what have you? Personally, I'm a fan of Harry and Luna. But that's neither here nor there. What matters is that the old shibboleth that held that these disputes could be settled by canon and canon alone has been revealed to be nothing more than wishful thinking on the part of, number one, people who hate shipping and ship wars, and number two, people who are on the side of the winning ship. But none of this really addresses why the pairing of Zuko and Katara actually succeeds. Just because we care less about fans supporting canon pairings than we did in the past does not necessarily mean there should be as many Zuko and Katara fans as there are. I've gone back and forth on whether I think it's a push factor situation or a pull factor situation, i.e. whether people just really want to see Zuko and Katara together, or whether they just go to that pairing because they think the pairing of Katara and Aang does not work. The Katara and Aang pairing was not universally acclaimed at the time, and it has not aged well. In fact, while most of the show has aged extremely well, the Katara and Aang pairing is, to me, the most notable exception. The discomfort of seeing the pairing of a teenage girl and a still prepubescent boy, positioned as the grand and wonderful conclusion to the journeys we've gone on these last 3 seasons, has not gone away. What has gotten worse than that, though, is the backlash against stories where the guy gets the girl without having to do much consideration as to what she thinks and to her side of the relationship. I'm not saying there was no backlash to pairings like that in 2008. There obviously was, but it was not nearly as intense as it is today. I was watching a video that straight up called the pairing of Aang and Katara nice guy wish fulfillment. I would not go that far. Aang is not a quote-unquote nice guy. He isn't actually nice guy. He is committed to pacifism and changing the world for the better, but his romantic myopia should not elide consideration. He's a child with childish fantasies about getting with his dream girl. Because he wants to be in a relationship with Katara, he believes this relationship is meant to be, and he never questions that belief, even when Katara makes choices, such as going after the man who killed her mother, that conflict with this idealized image of her as this perfect, flawless, uncomplicated, angelic figure. A show of this caliber should force Aang to question his childish limitations, and he should be forced to become more empathetic, at least in regards to Katara, if he is to be regarded as positively and framed as positively as he is by the show. Instead, she declares at the end of the Ember Island Players that she's conflicted. There is no more talk about the romance between them for the rest of the show, and then they have their grand kiss at the end of the last episode. Zutara, however, has aged well. It arguably fits better into the zeitgeist of today than it does the zeitgeist of 15 years ago. Obviously, the trope of the mysterious, enigmatic, conflicted bad boy anti-hero is not a new one. It's literally centuries old, having derived from the Byronic hero archetype. But we're also at this very weird crossroads in the cultural zeitgeist where we're emerging from a period of unfulfilled anti-heroes and morally ambiguous stories. The idea that, yes, there is good and evil, and that art should have clearly defined moral boundaries, seems to be making something of a resurgence lately. I'd suspect because of a few factors, namely the rise of activism and protesting we've seen a lot in the last 5 or so years, and the elevation of a lot of genuinely bad people to positions of power that's kind of soured a lot of people's view of the anti-hero. Whether we agree with this trend is not really relevant. I'm personally conflicted on it. I do like my anti-heroes and my morally ambiguous stories, but the effect is that how we as a culture view the anti-hero archetype is different than how we viewed him, and it usually is a him, 10 years ago. We want to see him held accountable, and Zuko is. A lot. By a lot of people, including himself. He's forced to reckon with the consequences of what he has done, both personally and the systems he has been complicit in perpetuating. We're stuck in strange times for the anti-hero. We see anti-heroes having to take responsibility, such as in BoJack Horseman, or deteriorating into madness, such as with JD and Heather's, or having a shallow redemption narrative, such as Kylo Ren in the new Star Wars trilogy. Zuko's arc and the work he has to do to make Katara forgive him, and the sacrifices he has to make for her, instead of just her forgetting about all his terrible behavior in the past, all this points toward a ethos of redemption that is not cliche or perfunctory. It's honest and earned, and it fits the spirit of the times today. But also, Zutara will probably never fade in popularity. Not even if the social mores shift again, and not just because of the obvious fire, water, sun and moon, light, dark symbolism. Or even because the opposition between them forces each of them to undergo a significant amount of character growth in order to accept the other, but because they're similar people, able to challenge each other to become better while still understanding each other. They have similar views of grief and mourning and justice, and they're more confident, more caring people when they are around each other, certainly. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this. Yes, before any of you comment this, I know Heathers was originally released as a movie in the 80s, but the musical, popular in the 2010s, makes several significant updates that change how the anti-hero is viewed. It's less a sociological critique than a very personal story, and they try to make JD an actively more sympathetic character than he is in the original. Anyway, watch more Avatar. It's a brilliant, caring, thoughtful, incisive show that only grows more relevant as the years go by. It's amazing, and I'm glad it's finally getting the attention it deserves. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon, I promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.